Judges Corner is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com and gatheringmagic.com. Support our show by visiting both websites. Now it's time for Judges Corner with David Green.
Welcome back to Judges Corner. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about double face cards, and as the name implies, they're cards with a front and a back on both sides. So double face cards were seen in Dark Ascension and Innistrad Block. They were some notable cards such as Huntmaster of the Fells, Delver of Secrets, and Garruk Relentless. And double face cards have a front side and a back side. All double face cards can transform, and the way they transform is unique to the individual cards. Some cards transform based on the number of spells played or not played. Some transform when a certain triggered condition happens. Some transform when you activate a certain ability. So the way they transform needs to be looked at individually on each card. And when they transform, they flip from their front side or their day side to their night side. And when they do, they have a whole new set of characteristics and information that we use to learn about the card and see how it works. So let's take a look at some examples and look at the cards a little closer to learn a little bit more about them. So taking a look at a Huntmaster of the Fells, we see that it looks just like a regular magic card. But if we take a look at a few other things, we'll notice that there's a weird sun up in the corner by its name. This lets us know that the card is face up. Then we also have a squiggly line down by the power and toughness. This is kind of a hint to let us know what the other side's power and toughness is going to be. When we flip it over, we'll notice that the card looks basically like a regular magic card, but there's a few distinct differences. For starters, there's a moon, which lets us know that this is the night side, up where the sun should normally be. The squiggly line is missing, letting us know what its power and toughness would be on the other side. And the mana cost isn't up in the corner. This is because double face cards are always face up when they're in your deck, hand, or graveyard, or when they're normally on the battlefield, and you can only cast them face up. You can't cast a double face card when it's face down, and there's no way for it to be face down in your deck or hand. Taking note of its mana cost is important for things like Abrupt Decay or abilities or spells that look at the card's converted mana cost. So we know that Ravager of the Fells has a 0 converted mana cost. We'll also notice that the card's name is Ravager of the Fells. This is important for a few other reasons, but we'll get into that a little later in the episode. And finally, you'll notice that the card looks like a red or green creature, but there's no mana cost to determine what its colors are. It is a red and a green creature, and the way we determine this is based on its color indicator, which is a small circle down by its creature type. In the circle, you'll notice two colors, red and green, and this lets us know that the creature is a red and green creature. So that really covers a lot of the basic rules with double face cards. Most of the rules from here on out are kind of interactions with other cards. For example, cards that are attached or equipped or affecting a card, such as +1/+1 counters or giant growth, or affecting it as long as it's on the battlefield, such as maybe like a Sower of Temptation. All those cards are still affecting double face cards when they transform because they don't become new objects, they just change over and get a whole new set of characteristics to identify them with. Another thing worth mentioning would be if you use slaughter games and have to name a card and uniquely identify it, you can name either side of the double face card and still go get the front side of the card from the deck. This is because when we name a card, we're just looking for a way to identify the card uniquely. And when we play something like Eradicate, we get a different result, because Eradicate is looking for all cards with the same name. So if we eradicate a Ravager of the Fells, all of the Huntmasters are basically going to be safe in the deck, because we can't pull any of them out since they don't have the same name as Ravager of the Fells. Our next examples talk a little bit more about clone, so let's take a look at those now. So what happens if I try to clone or make a token of a double face card or its regular side, such as Daybreak Ranger or Nightfall Predator? When this happens, we'll have a copy of whatever the card side that you copied is, but when it tries to transform, nothing will happen. You'll meet all the conditions, the trigger will go off, the trigger will do as much as it can, but when it gets down to flipping the card over, it just never transforms. This is because the other card side is blank, and there's nothing for it to transform over to, and we don't have those characteristics on the clone. Another cool thing worth noting about double face cards is that they can't be flipped face down, because they don't have a face down side. What I mean by this is a very common card in Commander known as Ixodron puts all cards as it enters the battlefield that are face up, face down. So what happens to double face cards? Does it transform them? What happens to clones or tokens? Does it make them tutus? Well, what happens here is all double face cards can actually be flipped over, including tokens or copies of them. Ixodron won't be able to turn our Nightfall Predator because it doesn't have a face down side, It just has a backside. So it continues staying what it is because it can't be flipped over. The same can be said for a clone of that Nightfall Predator or any tokens of that Nightfall Predator. The last couple of things I want to talk about are questions I've been asked before, such as if I blink or flicker a Lord of Lineage with a Restoration Angel, does it enter the battlefield as a Bloodline Keeper or Lord of Lineage? To get this answer, we look at how cards enter the battlefield. They enter untapped, unflipped, that's a Kamigawa thing, phased in, and face up. So we will get a Bloodline Keeper. The next question I've been asked is a Wanvuli Beast Tracker enters the battlefield, and I want to search my library for a card with Trample. Can I go get a Huntmaster of the Fells because Ravager has Trample? The answer is no, and that's because Huntmaster doesn't have Trample, only Ravager does, and while it's everywhere but on the battlefield flipped over, we use the characteristics of Huntmaster, and since it doesn't have Trample, we can't go get it. The next thing I want to talk about are checklist cards and sleeves with double face cards. If your sleeves are kind of transparent or you can kind of see through the back of them, you need to use a checklist card. And that's a card that was inserted in Dark Ascension in Innistrad packs. You can check off the card you want to pick and put it into a sleeve, and that'll be the representation of the card you want to use when it's everywhere but on the battlefield. When you play it, you'll go through your extra cards off to the side that you have with the deck, and you'll put the other side of the card onto the battlefield, or the face-up, face-down side onto the battlefield. You can put it on top of the checklist card or move the checklist card off to the side, but when it's on the battlefield, it needs to be the real card. Another thing worth mentioning is you can't have 4 checklists of Huntmaster of the Fells, but only 1 Huntmaster. You need to have 1 Huntmaster for each checklist that you're using. And when it's anywhere else, it's just the checklist card. You can use the regular card, but you need to have sleeves that aren't see-through, and you'll just pull it out of the sleeve and flip it over when it transforms or doesn't. So, that basically covers everything I want to talk about on double face cards. Now let's take a look at a question that was asked by one of our viewers. YouTube user 617beats asked if they play a Hands of Binding and encode it onto their Cartel Aristocrat, and then later give their Cartel Aristocrat Pro Blue, does the binding fall off? The answer is no, and this is because protection only protects from a limited number of things. It protects from damage, enchantments, equipments, or fortifications that would attach to it, any blocking, and any targeting that would be dealt to it. When you encode, you do target one of the creatures you control, but once it's encoded, it's always encoded onto the creature until the encoded spell is either removed from exile or the creature leaves the battlefield. If you have any questions, you can email us at judgescorner@gatheringmagic.com. And until next time, shuffle thoroughly, play at a reasonable pace, and catch you on the flip side.